Archaeologists thought they understood the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia until a single clay tablet surfaced from the mud brick wreckage of Shurapac, the city destroyed by the Great Flood. Its markings were faint, its purpose unknown, and no scholar could read a single line. When an experimental AI was brought in to decode it, the team expected a simple translation. Instead, the machine found patterns it was never designed to see, and a warning the world was not prepared to hear. The unearthed tablet of Shurapac. The discovery began on a silent afternoon at the outskirts of Talara. The heat pressed down on the excavation site, and the entire team moved slowly through layers of ancient dust. Talara is widely accepted as the location of Shurapac, the last great Sumerian city that was wiped out by the Great Flood around 2900 BCE. The archaeologists expected nothing more than damaged walls and broken pottery. Instead, they uncovered something that immediately froze the air around them. A section of ground collapsed under a worker's feet and revealed a hidden chamber that had been sealed for thousands of years. It was trapped under several layers of fallen mud brick. When they lowered a light inside, the team saw a room preserved in a disturbing state of abandonment. The chamber was small and completely silent. It carbonated to the period between the Uruk and early dynastic eras, which is the exact time frame linked to the earliest flood legends. The room appeared untouched since the day it was sealed. Charred animal bones lay scattered across the floor. Broken pottery shards covered the corners. A reed basket lay overturned near the wall, as if someone had dropped it while fleeing. There were no human skeletons, which is normal for sudden evacuations of ancient homes, but the scene still felt like a moment captured in terror. Something had forced the people of this room to leave in a hurry. At the center of the chamber stood a protective clay casing. It was thick and shaped to shield whatever was inside from fire, impact, and water. This alone was strange. Clay tablets from this era were almost never sealed in protective shells. When the casing was opened, the team found a single clay tablet inside. It was in perfect condition. It had survived because the chamber's ancient fire had baked it hard, making it durable. The tablet carried inscriptions so faint that the naked eye could barely see them. The light caught slight marks that hinted at deliberate encoding or extreme age. The tablet felt heavy in the hands of the archaeologists. It was heavier than any tablet they had ever lifted from Shurapac. This suggested that the clay used to form it had been chosen carefully. It was meant to last. A dig camera captured subtle etching patterns around the edges of the tablet. These markings did not match known script styles from Shurapac. They seemed foreign and out of place. The lead archaeologist stared at the strange marks and quietly stated that this was not an administrative record and was instead a message made for someone in the future. The team considered the possibility that the tablet was created by someone who believed disaster was coming. Shurapac was home to the figure known as Utnapishtim, also called Zu Sudra, who appears in ancient flood stories. This connection made the discovery even more disturbing. As the tablet was carried to the lab, the team learned that none of the markings matched any known Sumerian catalog. The tablet was not simply old, it was encrypted. The only thing capable of reading it was an advanced AI system that was never designed for archaeology.
The tablet that shouldn't exist yet somehow does. From the moment the researchers lifted the tablet from the shallow dust of the site, there was a sense that something about it violated the rules of Mesopotamian archaeology. Shurapac tablets are usually mundane that contain lists of barley rations, records of livestock exchanges, simple accounts of labor. They belong to the quiet world of scribes who documented the rhythms of a city on the edge of the floodplain. But this tablet was not quiet. It felt deliberate in a way that unsettled the team. Its clay surface carried a pattern of symbols that did not align with any known administrative purpose. Even its texture seemed slightly different, denser, almost overfired, as if the writer had wanted the tablet to outlast the building that once housed it. The inscriptions were tight, almost compressed, filling every available space. At first glance, the lines resembled the wedge patterns of archaic proto-cuneiform. Yet when the scholars leaned closer, they found repeating clusters that made no sense for economic writing. Some clusters represented water, others hinted at sky, others looked like rhythmic sequences of movement. They were arranged with a symmetry that felt too structured to be random, too symbolic to be administrative. Their arrangement felt like someone trying to say something urgently, but in a language that did not want to be easily spoken. It was the presence of the repeated water clusters that unsettled them the most. Shurapac's identity in Mesopotamian tradition is tied to one thing above all: the flood. In Sumerian mythology, it is the doomed city saved only through Zusadra's warning, the very place where the Great Deluge legend begins. To find a tablet in such a city that appeared to reference water, sky, and movement in repetitive cycles felt almost theatrical, like a message staged across millennia. But the team knew better than to jump to conclusions. Archaeology demands restraint, even when the evidence whispers otherwise. Still, the scholars could not ignore the discomfort creeping among them. Economic tablets do not use symbolic clusters. Ritual texts do, but those are usually found in temples, not administrative rooms. Even the so-called enigmatic tablets from Abu Salabik, which are strange experimental writings that still puzzle experts, did not resemble the structure in this artifact. Those tablets were chaotic. This one felt engineered. Every symbol was positioned with mathematical precision, as if the writer had constructed meaning through geometry rather than words. And the deeper the researchers looked, the more they felt an unnerving truth forming. Whoever wrote this tablet was coding something, not inscribing it. The team attempted a basic translation, but each effort failed. When they separated the symbols into syllables, the pattern dissolved. When they grouped them by semantic class, nothing aligned. When they treated them as numbers, the sequence became unstable. It was as though the tablet rejected human interpretation, as if it was designed to reveal different meanings depending on how one approached it. Traditional linguistic tools did nothing but expose more strangeness. By the end of the third day, one fact had become impossible to deny. The symbols behaved like a puzzle. Not a puzzle meant to entertain, but a puzzle meant to conceal. The researchers were standing in front of something crafted by a person who did not trust language alone to preserve their warning. And that realization pushed the team toward a decision that would change everything. They resolved to run a digital scan of the tablet, unaware that what waited inside would pull them into a darkness none of them were prepared to face.
The AI that was never meant to decode this. The researchers turned to a machine that had been built for an entirely different purpose. The AI they chose came from an intelligence lab, where it was designed to detect hidden patterns inside encrypted data. It was never intended to read ancient writing, it only knew how to recognize unusual structures. To prepare it for the task, the engineers fed it thousands of genuine Proto-Unia samples so the system could learn what normal writing from that era looked like. Then they uploaded the high-resolution scan of the tablet. The moment the analysis began, the AI stalled. It remained frozen for several long seconds because the inscriptions were packed with overlapping microgrooves that were denser than anything the machine had ever processed. The scanner was not confused in a supernatural way. It was overloaded by the sheer concentration of detail on the tablet surface. When the AI finally resumed, its first report confused the entire team. It did not classify the markings as early Sumerian or any known script. Instead, it flagged the structure as a mathematical loop. This meant the symbols were arranged in repeating sequences that shifted depending on how they were read. The system had seen looping structures before in encrypted files. It had never seen them in ancient writing. The researchers questioned the results. They thought the machine might be malfunctioning, but the same pattern appeared in every new scan. With each pass, the AI revealed more internal loops and repeating clusters that did not behave like normal language. It then produced something even stranger. Instead of giving translations, it began to output single words. These words were not generated from the tablet itself. They came from the AI's own training data. The engineers paused the test and reviewed how the machine created these labels. The explanation was simple. When the AI encountered shapes it did not recognize, it searched its memory for the closest pattern it already understood. Once it found a similar structure, it used a short label to describe that pattern. These labels were a normal part of the system's work in intelligence analysis. They were meant to help analysts understand what type of anomaly they were looking at. This process explained the fragments. The tablet contained clusters that resembled patterns the AI associated with cycles, breaks, returns, and repeated events.
That is how the system produced the unsettling words. They were the system's best attempts to describe structures it could not classify. With every new scan, the AI slowed down more and more. The system struggled to classify the tablet's dense patterns, but it kept producing the same looping structure and the same disturbing fragments. The team decided to force a full translation attempt. None of them understood that the next step would take them into a territory far darker than they were prepared to face.
The first translation. The team gathered around the monitor as the AI completed its first full pass over the tablet. No one expected a coherent translation because most of the symbols seemed to shift with each scan. Yet the machine slowly produced a block of text that stopped the entire room. It was short, fragmented, and written with a disturbing sense of urgency. The first line read that, "When the sky bends and the waters speak, the quiet ones rise again." The language did not resemble any common instruction or record from that period. It sounded like someone describing a world that was beginning to fail around them. The next line said that this world has drowned before, it will drown again. The final line in the first sequence warned that the watchers below do not sleep. The team immediately understood that they were not dealing with a myth recorded long after the event. They were reading the words of someone who believed a disaster was happening in real time. As more lines appeared, the translation became clearer and more grounded. The text described sudden changes in weather that came without warning. It said that heat arrived when it should have been cold, and that storms appeared without pattern. The writer claimed that the crops around Shurapac began to rot in the fields, and that the soil became soft and sour. These descriptions matched what archaeologists already knew about the final years of the city. The region suffered from environmental stress, rising groundwater, and collapsing irrigation systems. People would have watched their food fail and their stability weaken. Another line mentioned that the stars vanished over Shurapac. The AI flagged this as symbolic, but the scholars understood it could refer to dust storms or atmospheric haze. The description made sense in a city made of mud bricks surrounded by river plains that easily turned to marsh. If the river swelled or if storms worsened, the air could become thick enough to hide the night sky. The writer described this event with fear, but the wording matched real environmental collapse. Then, the translation produced a line about a second flood. The writer said it would not be a flood of water, but a flood of returning dark air. The scholars debated the meaning. They suggested it could refer to thick ash, possibly from distant volcanic activity or local burning. It could also describe the slow dimming effect that happened when dust storms covered the region for long periods of time. Whatever the exact meaning, the writer was clearly describing a suffocating event that followed the rise of the original floodwaters. The translation then claimed that the writer did not record these warnings by choice. The text said they were commanded by a voice from the deep to carve the message so that those who rise after us may see the signs. The scholars noted that ancient cultures often described intuition or fear as a voice. It did not need to be supernatural. It could be the writer feeling a strong sense of duty during a crisis. The idea that the message was carved for future survivors matched the protective casing found at the site. What unnerved the team most was the statement that this destruction was not unique. The tablet said that earlier worlds had fallen for the same reasons. This claim echoed several ancient beliefs that civilizations rise and collapse in repeating cycles. It matched the flood narratives linked to Zusudra and the destruction layers found across Mesopotamia. The writer clearly believed they were living through a repeating pattern. The team barely had time to process the meaning of the lines. The translation began to shift tone. The next section moved away from collapsing skies and rising waters. It hinted at something far more specific. It pointed toward a threat that did not come from above or from the rivers. It came from the ground beneath their feet. The tablet speaks of what lived before us. The room went silent as the next section of the translation appeared. The language was darker and heavier. The tone felt different from the earlier warnings about storms, failing crops, and darkened skies. The writer shifted from describing the collapse of Shurapac to describing something they believed existed long before the flood. The first line stated that the Great Flood was not sent to destroy humans. It said the waters were meant to erase something else. The tablet said there were beings that lived before people became the rulers of the plains. The translation rendered them as the ones without breath. The next line said they walked in shadow. Another line said they fed on the stillness. The team immediately questioned how the AI produced those phrases. The lead engineer repeated the same process they used earlier. When the system encountered a symbol cluster it did not recognize, it searched for the closest match in its training data. In this section, the symbols resembled patterns that appeared in old Sumerian exorcism tablets. These tablets used harsh descriptions to label forces that were not human. That was why the AI suggested the phrases "the ones without breath" and "walked in shadow." They were the closest conceptual matches the machine could identify. The words were not perfect translations. They were the system's best attempt to label a type of entity described in a form it recognized. The next part of the translation said that these beings were not destroyed completely. The writer claimed the flood pushed them into the Earth's cold places where the waters could not reach. The wording was simple and frightening. The tablet's wording reminded the scholars of several ancient stories that described beings associated with darkness and hidden places. In Sumerian texts, the Alalu demons were often mentioned as creatures that lived where light could not reach. They were described as forces that thrived in silent, untouched spaces beneath the ground or inside abandoned structures. Their presence usually signaled danger or imbalance in the natural world. The scholars also noted similarities to Babylonian descriptions of the Apkallu. According to Babylonian tradition, the first Apkallu were wise beings who lived before the Great Flood. After the flood, these beings were said to return in damaged or altered forms. Some records described a version of them that emerged from deep places below the earth. These corrupted Apkallu were seen as warnings of a world returning to chaos. Other Mesopotamian writings told stories of spirits described as dead but awake. These beings were believed to exist in the deepest layers of the underworld, trapped but conscious. Their descriptions matched the fearful tone of the tablet, which spoke of beings that survived the flood by remaining in the cold places beneath the earth. When the scholars compared these ancient descriptions to the phrases generated by the AI, they realized the tablet was not inventing new ideas. It was echoing concepts that already existed across early Mesopotamian belief systems. The tablet's warnings about beings without breath and beings that walked in shadow lined up almost perfectly with the way ancient people described entities they viewed as older than humanity. The match was close enough that the team felt a chill settle through the room. The translation then shifted to a line that troubled the team more than any of the earlier passages. The writer said, "These beings reappear when human arrogance rises." The text warned that new builders who forget the memory of the deep risk waking what sleeps below them. The wording was simple but filled with fear. The writer clearly believed that the disaster that destroyed their world did not remove the deeper threat. The AI continued scanning and paused over a set of symbols that described unusual signs. These included shaking ground, splitting soil, and strange flickers of light that appeared near fissures. The machine flagged these symbols because they matched patterns connected to geological activity. The scholars realized the writer had witnessed rumbling earth and sudden cracks in the land during the city's final days. These details aligned with modern observations of seismic anomalies. The coincidence was unsettling. The tone of the writing had changed again. The next line would push the fear in the room even higher.
When the researchers reached the last section of the tablet, the AI began connecting its translated phrases to modern scientific data. For the first time in the project, the AI was not simply translating language, it was comparing what the tablet described to patterns happening in the world today. What alarmed the engineers most was how easily the system established these connections. It behaved as if the tablet's warnings were not ancient metaphors, but descriptions of real conditions repeating in the present. The tablet mentioned waters rising where no water should rise. The AI interpreted this as referring to sudden and unusual flooding in regions historically known to be dry. To test the phrase, the AI polled global hydrological records. It found an immediate match with modern climate-driven flooding across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. In these regions, deserts are flooding after short bursts of extreme rainfall. River systems that were once stable are overflowing without warning, and cities built far from coastlines are suddenly experiencing water surges that their infrastructure was never designed to handle. The engineers were stunned that the system recognized a direct modern parallel in under a second.
Another phrase described the trembling beneath the cities of old. The AI linked this to elevated seismic activity in Iraq, Turkey, and Syria, which all sit on active fault lines that have experienced recent movement. The AI explained that ancient Mesopotamian tablets often associated underground disturbances with the opening of hidden or forbidden places. It clarified that the Sumerians viewed earthquakes not as geological events, but as signs of the underworld shifting. By mapping this cultural meaning to modern seismic data, the AI concluded that the tablet was warning about increased activity beneath sites once considered sacred. A third line referred to lights moving beneath the great waters. Because this phrase could not be understood symbolically without losing its intended meaning, the AI treated it as a literal description and searched for modern equivalents. It immediately connected the line to deep-sea light anomalies recently detected by scientific and military sensors. These anomalies have appeared in 3 major regions. In the Mariana Trench, autonomous submersibles recorded slow drifting bands of light more than 10,000 meters down, far below the reach of the sun, and in conditions where no bioluminescent life has ever been documented. In the Gulf of Aden, naval surveillance systems picked up faint mobile glows during routine thermal sweeps, moving in patterns that did not match any vessel or known marine creature. And in the Philippine Sea, deep ocean observatories registered pulsating illumination at depths where even the hardiest bioluminescent species cannot survive. Each incident remains unexplained, and none has been linked to geological activity or human technology. What unsettled the engineers most was the directness of the match. The tablet's phrasing was ancient, but the phenomenon described in it aligned almost perfectly with modern data. The AI flagged this alignment as statistically unusual, suggesting that the ancient writer had seen or experienced something uncannily similar. The tablet then shifted to a broader warning, the opening of the deep places. The AI interpreted this as an ancient way of describing tectonic shifts, new fissures, and the exposure of lower geological layers. To support this interpretation, it presented satellite imaging of active crust fracturing in regions directly tied to ancient Mesopotamian settlement zones, including northern Iraq, where deep fissures have opened near Mosul, southeastern Turkey, where recent quakes have split previously stable ground, and western Iran, where newly exposed rock layers indicate rising pressure beneath the surface. The system made it clear that this was not poetic language, it was a description of structural change in the planet itself, happening now in the very landscapes where the civilization that wrote the tablet once lived. When the AI analyzed the tablet's final warning about global destabilization, extreme weather, blocked sunlight, disappearing birds, and violent conflict, it cross-referenced current global datasets. It then produced a single chilling conclusion. Probability match, 87% correspondence with current global conditions. The room fell silent. This was no longer translation, it was prediction, and the AI was telling them the ancient writer was describing a collapse that had already begun. In the next moment, the system froze and generated a final message.